Hello, welcome to our webinar today on eOne Extender. This is Scott Jorgens. I'm from Endeavor Solutions on the marketing team. For those that are new to Endeavor and watching this recording, we've been around for 27 years now. Have three lines of business: advisory services, helping clients with their strategy and business process reengineering; ongoing implementations, upgrades, and support for clients on Microsoft Dynamics GP, as well as Dynamics 365 CRM and the other Microsoft Cloud products, including Azure and Office 365. We have offices in Toronto and Halifax, as well as Montreal, Edmonton, Ottawa, and London, Ontario. Feel free to visit our team online. We have each of our consultants' profiles. You can find them on LinkedIn as well as on our website under the About Us section. We look forward to working with you now and into the future. Now I'd like to turn it over to Nicole Albertson, who is a product specialist at eOne Solutions, to talk to you about Extender and provide an engaging set of demonstrations about this fantastic tool set that a number of our clients use to create new fields or even new screens to complement GP with their own unique business processes. And it's been a fantastic tool used by many of our consultants. Over to you, Nicole.
Okay, thank you, Scott. As you said, my name is Nicole Albertson. I am a product specialist here at eOne Solutions. One of the specialties is obviously Extender, as well as Smart List Builder and Smart View, along with a few others. So today I'm going to go through Extender. We're going to spend most of our time actually in the product, but I do have a couple things I want to cover just before we get in there. So first, just what is Extender? What can it do for you? Well, Extender allows us to build out new screens in GP with the formatting that you need. So when I say that, why would we need new screens? Well, today you may be using user-defined fields that GP has. You may be using Excel or Access or somewhere to store data just because there isn't fields in GP. That's the reason we want to put that data into GP, have it integrate with your data you already have. And maybe we don't want to use those user-defined fields. We want to create our own that have the proper formatting. Most of the user-defined fields are just string fields. If you're trying to store a date in them, it isn't really efficient. You have to type in the date, then you're going to get different formats from everybody who's doing that. You can't easily do queries on that then because of the different formatting. So we'll get it in those formats that you need for that data and allow you to capture all that data that GP just doesn't allow you to capture out of the box. When we do that, we're going to store all that data for you. You don't have to worry about any of the storage. We're going to store it all in your company databases and do all of that. And because we are storing that in SQL, we want you to be able to report on that data and get it out of GP. So we can do that using things like SmartList, Report Writer. We can get some of it there. Or because it is SQL data, we can create SQL views, and you can use that wherever you might be reporting outside of the core GP reports. Things like Crystal reports, SQL reporting services, that type of thing. Now, as we go through this, there are two versions of Extender. We have Standard and Enterprise. The Standard version is going to allow us to build out those new screens and capture that data. It'll store it all for us, and then we can report on it. So everything I kind of talked about, we can do with the Standard version. Enterprise comes in and adds in a logic piece for us, and I'll show you some examples, but it's kind of taking that data that you're capturing one step further and saying, now that I'm capturing it, what can I make it do for me? How do I make sure that the dollars I'm entering match the dollar on the transaction amount? Double verifying that type of thing, or making it come from one field to another field. So a lot of different things we can do with Enterprise. It's just taking that data capture and taking it one step further for us. So just keep that in mind that there are two different versions, and we'll show you some samples from both. And then before we jump in, we have two ways to capture resources. We have Extender Windows and we have Extender Forms. So I just want to kind of go through these because you'll see both, and they are two different ways that we can present the users with data entry windows. So an Extender window attaches to a GP window. So I have to open, for example, the account maintenance, pick an account, and then I can open the Extender window off of that, and it will be attached to that specific account when I enter data in the Extender window. When I save that, if I pull up a different account, that data is not there. If I go back to that original account, that data would be there. So it's going to be attached to a specific GP record and attached to a specific GP window. A form in Extender, on the other hand, is really independent of any of your GP setup and any GP data. We create our own menu. So you add a new menu under cards or transactions, wherever you'd like it. And then we add our forms to that new menu. Now I can pull GP data into it, but it doesn't have to be. It can be like your own little module that you're building, and I'll show you examples of that as well. Just kind of want to clarify that there are two different ways we can do that. It's going to matter what do you want to capture, what's the best way to do that in your environment. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to GP now, and this is GP 2016. If you're using 2013, 2015, it's going to look very similar. If you're still on 2010, it does look a little bit different. Most of the functionality is the same. I'll try and tell you if I do something that isn't there in 2010. But what I want to do is kind of show you Extender windows to start. So I'm going to go to Cards, Sales, and I'm going to pull up the customer address. And I'm just going to pick a customer here, and this is Fabricam data, so we'll just pick Getaway. And I'm going to pull up an address. Now when I go to Additional, these are some of my Extender windows as well as other windows I have for other products. So like service extensions might be coming from field service or something like that, but my customer shipping information is an Extender window. So when I pick that, if I move it to the side a little bit here, you can see at the top it is attaching to the record that I had pulled up, that customer ID, and that address code. So when I enter data here, it's going to be very specific to that record. So I'll just say that I'm the contact, enter a phone number, and you can see as I do this that fields are coming in different formats. I had just string fields, I have emails, I have phone numbers, I have checkboxes here, a lot of different options there. So as I save that, if I change this to a different address code, not even changing the customer, just a different address code, you can see at the top that it changed that address code and my data is no longer there because it is keyed to the other address. Just to show you, if I go back to that other address, that data is there again because we're pulling up that address. So you choose how you're going to link this to the data, and then we'll key off of that as we save that data. Now how does that look in Extender? Well, let me open Extender and show you that window. So you can see here is the setup, and I'm going to open the other window just to have it next to it for you. So this is the setup of this window that we've created. So at the top here you can see we've just picked what window do I want this associated with in GP. I chose those key fields because I wanted it specific to that address for that customer. I could have just done customer number, but then I wouldn't have gotten it specific for each address. So you get to choose how do you want to key that. And then we've entered fields. Now I can come in here and as simple as typing a new name, and we'll just call it Notes 2, and selecting what type of field do I want this. And when I select a field type here, it isn't defining the data that's there or anything like that. It's just how am I going to save that data? How am I going to display it to the end user? Am I going to allow them to just type numbers because it's a currency, or is it a string where they can type whatever they want? So that's what we're defining here, and you can see a lot of different options, those checkboxes, currencies, dates, kind of the standard ones, as well as we can create drop-down lists, and you define what that list is. So if I choose this, it asks me to create the list of what items do I want in that drop-down list. We can do lookups to other fields, so if I want to pull in, say, the vendor ID, I can do a lookup to the vendor, and then it will do GP standard vendor lookup for me. I'm just going to pick a string at this time just to get us a field there. So I'm going to pick long string and save that, and you can see that that's on there. Now if I save my window and then I just reopen the window I have, you can see now that there is a Notes 2 field there. So as simple as that, I added another field to my window, didn't affect the data that was already there, but I added what I needed. So we can always be modifying these fields. Of course, we don't want to really modify, if you've already been entering data, the fields that have data in them, because you may affect the data. unless you're careful and we know what we're modifying there. But if you need additional data, we can always do that. Now let's just track something and create our own window. So let's just say on the vendor, for example, I just need to track some extra information. Okay, so we're going to go back to our extender window, and we're just going to call this vendor demo, just for sake of having a window here. And now I just have to pick that GP window that I want this on. And I'm going to do the vendor maintenance. You can see it automatically picks a key for me. We do that on a lot of the common windows. You can always change it if we aren't picking what you want it to be. Maybe I want a key off of the address on here. I can do that. But by default, we're just going to key off the vendor here. And now it's a matter of picking some fields. What do I want on here? So I'm going to do just some fields, and I'm going to name them based on the types so that you can see those different types coming through. So we'll do a currency. We'll do one of those drop-down lists. And add a few items there. Let's do we'll just do a lookup so you can see how that one goes, and we'll do it to the item, just to have something. Okay, so I have a few fields. Now when I did that, that was a one-to-one. We saw that on the shipping information. I could enter in one email address, 1 hours, all of that. We also have the option to do a scrolling grid where I can enter multiple records. So just to show you a few more types, I'm going to do a quantity. And we'll do a date. Okay, so I'm going to enter a few. So we're going to have our scrolling grid, and we're going to have our one-to-one records. So when I save this, and I just have to relaunch that vendor maintenance the first time to get it on the menu there. If I pull up a vendor, go to additional, there's our vendor demo that we just created. And as simple as that, we have those fields that I can track. So now I can say this was $10. We want item B. We'll look up that was going back to the items. So we'll pick our 100 XLG, and I can do that. And then we have our scrolling grid here where I can enter in multiple records. And keep going like that. So you have the option, do you want just that one-to-one type of field? Do you want the one-to-many where you can have that scrolling grid? Or in this case, do we want both? Now if you are on 2010, the one difference there is you can't have both on the same window. That was a feature added in 2013. But you can have one or the other if you'd like there. But so it's really designed so that you can get the data you need in the format you need. The hardest part about all this is figuring out what did I truly need to capture in the first place, and how do I want to capture it. As I do that, a lot of times we'll see people create 2, 3, 4 different windows. Which way is the best way for us, and play with them. Which one works? Then you go with that one. So you have options there. Now, as we talk about that data, what other things can we do with that window? Well, we have options so that I don't always have to go to additional and choose that window. I can have it auto open, and I can say when I enter in, and we'll pick a field here, we'll say the short name on that vendor maintenance field. When I enter into that short name, I want it to automatically open that window for me. So we can do that. You can also see an auto close here. It's disabled at the moment because our scrolling grid is turned on. If I turn off the scrolling grid, auto close becomes enabled. That's going to save the data and close the window for me. We don't have that available when you have the scrolling grid turned on because we don't know how many lines you want to enter before we save it and close it. But I'll turn that on here, as well as we can do a hotkey. So I can do a Control D is going to open that window as well. So I'll save this. I need to relaunch that vendor maintenance just to get the trigger there to work. So we'll pull up a vendor here. If I do a Control D, you do have to save your window in Extender first. Sorry about that. I'll do a Control D again, and now it's opening that window. You can see I turned off the scrolling grid. But now if I enter in some data, and I'm just going to tab off of this lookup field here, and you can see it closed it. If I do a Control D again, that data is saved there. Okay, as well as I'm going to put my cursor in the name field, and I'm going to hit Tab. It automatically opens that window as my cursor tabs into the short name field. So some different options to get you into the window a little bit easier instead of remembering to always have to go to Additional and select it there. Another thing that we can do is, you see this data on the vendor maintenance here, but you may want it on another window in GP. We can do that with what we call inquiries. This is going to be really important if you're doing it against transactions. Maybe you're doing it against your sales transactions. Well, once you've transferred that from a order to an invoice, or you've posted it, we can't pull that up in the sales transaction window anymore. We have to go to the inquiry. So then we want to create an inquiry for our extender stuff as well, so that we can see it when it moves to history. So we'll just do this on a window, and I'm going to pick this transaction by vendor window here. So I'm going to do an inquiry. We'll add one, and we'll just call this vendor demo inquiry, just to keep it similar. And I just have to pick that new window now that I want to add this to. Okay, so I picked that new window. Now you can see I do have options for read-only and a hotkey here. If I want to do that, I can make this window read-only, and that way, if people have access to it on the vendor maintenance window, they can edit that data. But when they're opening it on the inquiry window, they aren't able to edit it. You can also have one inquiry that's editable and one that's read-only, and then we have security for each of those where you can grant it to different users. So I'm going to make it read-only just to show you that. We'll say OK and save that. And now I'm going to relaunch that window to get it into the menu structure. And if I pull up Aaron Fitz and go to Additional, you'll see it there. And you can see that data, but it is read-only. It's not going to let me change any of it here. So we can get that same data as long as whatever our key was, and in this case it was vendor ID, is on the window I want to put it on. We can do that. So you can put that data all over GP wherever you'd like it there. The other thing we have available is a smart list integration, where I can add this data to one of the smart lists that are available in this list, and it's not a complete list of all the defaults. It's a very limited list, and I'll show you how we do it if one of them isn't in this list here in a minute. But I'm going to do it to the vendors. Then I just have to tell it that vendor ID on my window is the same as vendor ID on that smart list. And I save this. And now when I go to Smart List, and I probably shouldn't have hit yes on that message. I'm not sure what's in here. Okay. And now I go to Purchasing and go to Vendors. You won't see it here by default, but if I go to Columns and Add, and I can sort this by the sequence, you see those three fields that we entered in the one-to-one relationship. You will not get the ones that are in the one-to-many, the scrolling grid. Even though I have them turned off, you still won't get them even if I turned it on. So going with that smart list integration right off your extender window, we only get the 15 main one-to-one fields. But I can add those and say OK. And now you can see the few that we entered records for are there. It does slow down your smart list because it is running it twice. Basically, it's running it to get the data, and then it's running it to go get the extender data to add on. But it is an option if you want to use that. A better option is using Smart List Builder, which is another eOne product. If you're not familiar with it, it allows us to build out new smart lists. So I'm just going to call this vendor demo. We'll put it in the purchasing folder. And I'm just going to pull in that default vendor list as my starting point. But now what I can do is add an extender resource. And I'm going to pick a window and choose our vendor demo window. We'll link that on using our vendor ID. And when I do that, you can see here's the fields that are on that window. And I am getting the 3 that we had as our one-to-one relationship as well as that scrolling grid. So if you want that scrolling grid in there, you have to use something like SmartList Builder to get it. So now I'm getting all of that. If I save this, it'll run it in SmartList here, and you can see the few that I've entered data for. Aaron Fitz, we had that scrolling grid, and I entered 2 records there, so that's why I have 2 records now for Aaron Fitz, because I have that scrolling grid turned on. So, and it's a lot quicker when you run it using the SmartList Builder built one, because it's only running it once. It's putting all that data together to query it once. So, a couple options there if you want it in SmartList. As long as we're talking reporting, if I pull this up, if you want this stuff on report writer reports, which is GP reports, the ones you print when you post a transaction or when you go to reports and print something, the only thing we can get there is these 15 one-to-one fields. We cannot get the scrolling grid on those reports. We cannot get these 2 fields. We can only get these 15 here into report writer. It is a little bit of a process to get it there, but it can go there. It's creating a couple calculated fields to get it onto your report. Okay, so that is a little bit about a window. What I want to do now is switch over to forms. So I'm going to switch to forms, and I already have some created. We're going to pretend we are a property management company. And where are they? They're there. Okay, so we're going to pretend we're a property management company that manages apartment buildings, condos, that type of thing. And if you remember at the beginning, I said that forms aren't attached to anything in GP. They're a little bit independent, so I've created my own little module to manage my buildings. So if I go to cards, we see property management. That's what I built in Extender. It's a menu I created in Extender. And then I have all of these different forms here. So property maintenance, I'll just create a property here for us. And you can see I have all these different fields. We aren't going to worry about all this data here, but I can link back to GP data if I want to. So this goes back to the GP employees. I don't have to link back to any GP data, but I can. But basically I have the same type of fields available to me that I did on a window. It's just that my key here I typed in. I wasn't keying off of something in an Extender or in a GP window. I can do it on my own here. So if I save that property, I can now link that property to the units in it, because of course an apartment has more than one unit in its property. So there's that property. Now I can create a unit. We'll just say it's 100. And we can enter the appropriate information for that unit. And say that's good. And we can keep linking this stuff all together, just like you would in any sort of GP process. You've created that own little module here to do all of that. Now, on the property, you saw me, it was just a string. I entered Fargo 123. On the units, my key was picking that property and entering a unit, kind of like we did with the customer addresses where you had the customer and an address ID. We also can have auto increments, just like document numbers do in GP. We can have that as our key if you don't want to have to remember one. So now I'm linking back to the property. Oops, and looks like when I imported this linked lookup didn't come through. So let's just save that and try this again. There's our unit, and I can go through this process here. So think of the forms as something where you can create something GP doesn't already do. Maybe I want to track a bunch of information that we're tracking somewhere outside of GP. I'd really like to track it in GP because it's the same people that enter all the GP data entering that stuff. Plus, when we put it in here, I got a nice window to do it. It's all backed up with my GP data. I can then report on it with GP data. So that kind of thing might be useful to you as well. It's just a matter of what do you want to capture as to if we're going to use a window or a form like this. Now with forms, if I look at the setup of this, it is a little bit different, but mostly the same. So you can see on our form, we have 2 columns of 15 fields there that we can use. The window only had 1 column of 15. That's one of the minor differences between the two, so you can get a few more fields of data on there. The other thing is you can notice at the top we're not picking a GP window and picking the keys off of that window. We're creating our own. So I picked what I want to call it, then I gave it my own ID. If I drill into that ID, you can see here's where I could use existing lookups, that auto increment, or the secondary lookup. That's up to you how you want to do your key there. And then the field types, adding a field is exactly the same. We don't change anything there between the different field types that we have available for you. In the options, I can still do that scrolling grid. We don't have our auto open, auto close hotkey type of functionality because we're not opening it from a GP window. We're opening it from our own menu, so there really isn't anything to key off of the auto open there for you. Now, if you're worried about multi-currency with Extender, if you are using multiple currencies, on the windows, it will pull whatever currency formatting and setup you have for that module. So it pulls from, if I open account maintenance, it pulls the financial currency information. If I open something on a sales transaction, it's going to pull the currency setup from that module. On a form, you have to set up the multi-currency how you want it. We don't know what to pull. You set it up. It'll let you pick your currencies, your rate method, all of that here. If you don't need currency on this specific window, I don't have any currency fields here, I don't have to set it up if I don't want to. The other thing we have that's nice with forms is we can create these extra windows, as we call them, these buttons on the bottom. You can have up to 8 buttons. If you have more than 8 extra windows, we just put them in this Windows drop-down. So you can have a bunch of extra stuff tied to this tenant, kind of like how GP has all the different windows that are tied. You open the vendor maintenance and you can get to a lot of other places from there. We can do that. And for the basic extra windows, it just is going to give you up to 15 more fields. If I look at the setup of that, 15 more fields there of data that's going to track against whatever your key is on your form that you have open. So we can do that, but there are other options. Everything I've shown you up to this point today has been Extender Standard. What I want to jump into now is a few features for Extender Enterprise, where we can take it a step further than just capturing this data that we keep doing. So the rest of these buttons, occupants through history here, are Extender extra windows on our form, but they're using some of the logic that Enterprise gives me. So occupants is actually a different form that I have set up in my system. So it's a totally separate form. I could go to my menu and pick it, but I wanted to open it right from here. So when I click this, it opens the occupants window or form, puts in that tenant ID for my key, and is going to let me enter in some information about the occupants. Okay. Same with vehicles. It's another form that I'm opening from there. So one of the things in action, or the logic lets us do, is open one form from another form. Or we can open GP windows from our form. So the cash receipt here opens the GP cash receipts. You can see it took my tenant 6 and put it in as a customer ID. We just created that tenant, so GP is saying, hey, that's not a customer in our system. Do you want to create that? We'll add it. It takes that, puts it over in the customer ID. I could enter in all this information. We'll save that. And now I can create that cash receipt. We can say they gave us a rent check for $1,000. And I can post that. We don't need our reports. Okay, where did my form go? Okay, so now if I hit the history button, it opens the history with tenant 6 and pulls in that payment we just did. Okay, so we can link back and forth to GP between extender data, whatever we'd like to do there. That's one thing we can do with the logic portion that's going to be available to you in Extender Enterprise. Now, that doesn't take any code to do it. If I go to my forms and just show you some of the options, we have things like disabling and enabling fields, and actually the disable fields, enable fields, and run template are available in Standard. So we've put a few actions in Standard. The rest of these are all available in Enterprise. Things like being able to set a field value automatically. If you want it to default the field to $10, we can do that. Opening and closing those extender forms, opening the GP form like we just saw. We can have it open other applications. Maybe you want it to open Excel. We can do that for you. Displaying dialogues will prompt messages to the end user, and I'm going to try and show you one of those here. I hope it's set up so that we can either just give them a warning, we can have it do things, that type of thing. Running GP macros if you're still using those. We have a run SQL script if you want to take data out of GP and update CRM, for example. We can have it running SQL scripts to keep your customer and your accounting sync between the two. We can also run GP script. When I say GP script, that means dexterity script, and it really opens it up to allow you to do almost anything you want. We can't, when I say that, change what GP does already. So I can't say this field isn't required, this process, the way it posts isn't work this way. We can add to it. Okay, so we can always write some script adding to it. Now don't worry if you don't know how to write dexterity script. I'm sure that Endeavor has some people on staff that can do services for you writing that script. If they need help, we have people on staff as well that can write that script for you. It's more of what do you need it to do. Let us help you do that with Extender. Okay, just to give you a sample of that, if I open the transaction entry in sales, and I'm just going to enter a transaction here. We'll do Aaron Fitz. I'm just going to enter my name as the customer PO number, and we'll just enter one in here. We'll just create a batch called test. Okay, and I'm going to save that. Now let's change this to a return, and we'll do another record for Aaron. Now this is when I talked about a dialogue. This is the dialogue popping up. It says a document has already been entered for this customer with this purchase order number. What I want GP to do is tell me that if the customer PO number and the customer ID combination has already been entered, you watch me enter an invoice for it, then I entered a return for it, so we know that combination is already existing. I want it to tell me, hey, that already exists, what do you want me to do with it? Because we don't allow that in our environment. GP does, but I didn't want to, so I made Extender add on to the GP process saying that it's not going to be allowed. So it pops up here, it says, let's delete it, which basically just goes to actions and runs the delete code here. We can continue. If we allow duplicates, we just kind of want to double check it, we can do that. I can open the inquiry window, and you can see that it put that standard invoice number in. We're at 78, it put 57 or 77 in here. We didn't post it, so I'm going to change it to unposted and display that in there. Indeed, it is that duplicate that we entered. And now I can see that that's that. I can go and delete that or whatever I need to do at this point. Now, displaying the dialogue is an action that's there by default, but having it check the code between the customer PO number and the customer ID, it did take some code to do that. So if I can find my Extender window here, I'll show you what we're doing there. You can see it's a little bit of code here. Like I said, don't let this scare you. There are people that can write this for you as services. But basically looking at all of the SOP tables, all of that data, and seeing does that customer PO number plus the customer number already exist in any of those tables. If it does, then we're going to come back and give you those options. What do you want those buttons to do? So things like that. Think of it, that's just one example, and it didn't even really have anything to do with Extender data. I made GP have some extra functionality. I could have done that against our Extender data as well. I'm checking data, did I already enter this, that type of thing. but I wanted to show you that we can actually do it against GP as well. Okay, so there are a lot of places we can take Extender. It's just a matter of what do you want to capture in your environment, what do you want to make it do for you, and where should we take it there. I am going to open our website here quickly and show you a few things there for you. If I go to downloads, and our website is eonesolutions.com, E-O-N-E solutions.com, and I pick Extender under downloads here. You can actually download the Extender that's appropriate based on your GP version. In the notes under each one, you'll see what compatibility it is with which version. Generally, if it says 2016, that means GP 2016, 2015 goes with GP 2015. Just make sure, because we did have to do releases, whether it's the main release or the R2 release and that type of thing. So make sure you're getting the appropriate one. But when you download it, install it, you can play with it in Fabricam without any registration keys. If you want to kind of see how easy is it to create, how does it interact, that type of thing. If you're just playing, we do recommend it in a test environment so that you're not putting all those tables in your live environment. They aren't going to harm anything. We just don't like to put a bunch of tables that may or may not be needed depending on if you choose to go with Extender or not. But keep that in mind. You can play with it in Fabricam without any registration. And it will, if you're on 2013 or higher, it will open up the enterprise functionality, so you'll have full functionality there. So keep that in mind. If you're only looking at standard, a few of the actions and that kind of thing won't be there when you go with standard. We also have a bunch of templates here. So you can see we have some for standard, some for enterprise. So if I expand the enterprise one, here's that property management one we looked at today. So if you want to dig into that further, you can, once you have Extender installed, you can download this and import it into Extender. It'll be there for you to play with. As well as here's that duplicate PO number check. We have a lot of people using that one live. They wanted that implemented in their environment, so they bought Extender Enterprise, downloaded that, and they were ready to go with that process there. We have one that defaults your batch IDs in if you want that, so that they automatically, it pulls in the user ID and the date as your batch ID. So there's a lot of different templates here to learn from, play with, use live, whatever you want to do, just to give you some samples there. Okay, back to our PowerPoint here. A few things to finish out here. The pricing on Extender, the standard pricing is in Canadian dollars $24.50 if you want to go with a one-time purchase model, and then there's 17.5% annual maintenance on that. We also have a subscription model where it's $145 a month. You pay as you go. You can cancel at any time. So whichever way you want to go, that is the pricing for standard. The enterprise pricing is just about double there at the $48.50 for the one-time purchase, and of course 17.5% maintenance on that. And the subscription model is $288 per month. Okay, and next steps.
Thank you, Nicole. Yes, if there's any questions, talk to your consultant or give a call to Steve Ewing for additional questions and inquiries.